The mirror in the Glen Rio, New Mexico general store showed a face Fiona Baker had learned not to examine too closely over her 22 years of living. Her mother had called her plain, her father had called her unfortunate-looking, and the boys back in St. Louis had simply never called her anything at all. She adjusted the faded calico dress that hung loose on her thin frame and tucked a strand of mousy brown hair behind her ear before heading to the counter with the sewing supplies she had managed to scrape together money for. The year was 1876, and Fiona had arrived in this dusty border town between New Mexico and Texas 3 weeks prior, following the death of her aunt, who had left her a small cabin on the outskirts of town. It was not much, but it was hers, and that meant more than any fancy words ever could. The cabin needed repairs. The roof leaked in 2 places, and the fence around the small property had fallen into complete disrepair. But it was shelter, and it was better than staying in St. Louis, where every day reminded her that she was the daughter nobody wanted and the woman nobody noticed. "That will be $1.15, the shopkeeper said without looking at her. Fiona counted out the coins carefully, her fingers rough from the work she had been doing trying to fix up the property. She had been taking in mending and washing from some of the town's residents to earn money, though the work was scarce and the pay even scarcer. As she turned to leave, she nearly collided with a wall of muscle and leather. "Pardon me, madam," a deep voice rumbled above her. Fiona looked up and up, her eyes widening at the sheer size of the man standing before her. He had to be at least 6 feet 4 inches tall, with shoulders so broad they seemed to block out the sunlight streaming through the store's dusty windows. His hair was dark brown and fell past his shoulders, and his face was weathered but handsome in a rugged way that spoke of years spent outdoors. His arms, visible beneath the rolled-up sleeves of his worn shirt, were corded with muscle, and his hands looked like they could break wood with ease. "No harm done," Fiona mumbled, trying to step around him. "Wait," he said, and she froze, unused to anyone wanting to prolong a conversation with her. "You are new to town, the Baker woman who inherited the old Pritchard place." "Yes, that was my aunt's cabin. I am Fiona Baker." The man extended one massive hand. "Grayson North. I have a cabin up in the mountains about 5 miles north of here. I come down for supplies once a month or so." Fiona shook his hand briefly, surprised by the gentleness of his grip despite his obvious strength. "It is nice to meet you, Mr. North." "Just Grayson," he said, and then he did something that made Fiona's heart skip in confusion. He smiled at her, a genuine smile that reached his dark eyes, and said, "It is not often we get someone as pretty as you settling in these parts." Fiona felt heat rush to her cheeks, but it was accompanied by a sharp twist of annoyance. Was he mocking her? Making fun of the plain woman who had dared to think she could make a life here? She pulled her hand back and clutched her package to her chest. "I do not appreciate being made sport of, sir," she said stiffly, moving past him and out into the harsh New Mexico sunlight. The walk back to her cabin took 20 minutes, and with each step, Fiona felt the sting of what she perceived as mockery. Pretty. Her. The word felt like a burr under her skin, unfamiliar and painful. No one had ever called her pretty, not even as a kindness. Her mother had made it clear from an early age that Fiona had inherited all the wrong features from both sides of the family. Too thin, too angular, eyes too large for her face, hair the color of dead grass. The litany of her faults had been recited so often that Fiona knew them by heart. She spent the afternoon working on her vegetable garden, trying to coax life from the stubborn soil. The sun beat down mercilessly, and by the time evening approached, her back ached and her hands were filthy. She was drawing water from the well when she heard the sound of a horse approaching. Grayson North sat astride a large bay horse, and behind him, another horse was laden with what appeared to be lumber and tools. He dismounted with easy grace despite his size and removed his hat. "Miss Baker," he said with a nod, "I noticed your roof has some holes when I rode past the other day. Thought I might lend a hand with repairs if you would allow it." Fiona straightened, wiping her dirty hands on her already soiled apron. "I cannot pay you." "Did not ask you to," he replied easily. "Neighbors help neighbors out here. That is how we survive." She wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain her pride and her distance, but the practical part of her knew she needed help. The roof was beyond her capabilities, and if the autumn rains came before it was fixed, she would be in serious trouble. "I suppose I could accept your help," she said carefully. "But I do not want charity." "Not charity," Grayson said, already unloading the lumber. "Just being neighborly. Though if it makes you feel better, you can feed me supper when we are done working each day." Over the next 3 days, Grayson arrived each morning and worked on the roof until the sun began to set. Fiona would bring him water and whatever simple food she could manage, and they would talk in brief exchanges. She learned that he had been living in the mountains for 5 years, trapping and hunting, occasionally taking on work as a guide for wagon trains passing through. He had come west from Tennessee after the war, looking for solitude and peace. On the second day, as she handed him a cup of water, he looked at her with those steady dark eyes and said, "You have a beautiful smile, Fiona. You should share it more often." She nearly dropped the cup. "Mr. North." "Grayson," he corrected. "Grayson, I would appreciate it if you would not mock me." He set down his hammer and climbed down from the ladder, standing before her with a puzzled expression on his sun-bronzed face. "Mock you? Why would I do that?" "Because," she said, frustration making her voice sharp, "I am not beautiful and I am not pretty, and I am certainly not someone who should be told such things as if they were true." Grayson was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching her face. "Who told you that you were not pretty?" "Everyone," Fiona said flatly. "My whole life. And I have made my peace with it. I do not need false compliments." "Fiona," he said softly, and the way he said her name made something flutter in her chest. "I have been alone in those mountains for 5 years. I have seen sunrises that would make grown men weep, and stars so bright they seem close enough to touch. I know beauty when I see it, and I am looking at it right now." She turned away, unable to bear the sincerity in his voice. "The roof will not fix itself, Mr. North." He let it drop, but the next morning when he arrived, he greeted her with, "Good morning, pretty lady," as naturally as if he had been saying it for years. By the end of the week, the roof was fixed, the fence was mended, and the door that had been hanging crooked on its hinges now closed properly. Fiona prepared a better supper than usual, using some of the precious stores she had been saving. They ate together as the sun set, painting the New Mexico sky in shades of orange and red. "I appreciate all your help," Fiona said quietly. "I truly do not know how I would have managed without it." "You would have figured it out," Grayson said. "You are stronger than you think." "I am not strong," she replied. "I am just stubborn." "Sometimes that is the same thing." He paused, turning his tin cup in his large hands. "I will be heading back up to my cabin tomorrow, but I will be down again in a few weeks. If you need anything before then, you can ask Samuel at the general store to get word to me." "Thank you," Fiona said, and meant it. Grayson stood, his frame seeming even larger in the growing darkness. "Fiona, I want you to know something. Every word I have said to you has been the truth. You are pretty. More than pretty. And whoever told you different was blind or cruel or both." Before she could respond, he mounted his horse and rode off into the gathering darkness, leaving Fiona standing in her doorway with her heart beating too fast and her mind whirling with confusion. The next few weeks passed slowly. Fiona continued her work, taking in more mending and washing, slowly building up a small but steady clientele among the women of Glenrio. She found herself thinking about Grayson more often than she cared to admit, his words echoing in her mind during the long, quiet evenings. Pretty. Beautiful smile. The words felt foreign, like a language she had never learned to speak. One afternoon, as she was hanging laundry to dry in the relentless sun, she heard riders approaching. 3 men on horseback stopped at her fence, and something about the way they looked at her property made unease crawl up her spine. "Afternoon, miss," the leader said. He was a lean man with a scar running down his left cheek. "We are looking for work and wondered if you might need some hands around the place." "I have no money to hire anyone," Fiona said, keeping her voice steady. "Thank you for the offer." "Now that is a shame," the man said, dismounting despite her clear dismissal. His companions followed suit. "Pretty little thing like you out here all alone. That is not safe." "I am fine," Fiona said, taking a step back toward the cabin. "I must ask you to leave." "We just got here," one of the other men said with an unpleasant laugh. "No need to be unfriendly." Fiona's hand found the door frame, and she was about to dart inside when a voice cut through the tension like a knife. "The lady asked you to leave." Grayson sat on his horse at the edge of the property, and even from a distance, Fiona could see the steel in his expression. He dismounted and walked forward, and the 3 men seemed to shrink despite their numbers. "We were just talking," the scarred man said, but he was already backing toward his horse. "Talking is done," Grayson said flatly. "Leave. Now." The men mounted quickly and rode off, throwing dark looks over their shoulders. Grayson watched until they disappeared in the direction of town before turning to Fiona. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern replacing the hardness in his features. "Yes," Fiona said, though her hands were shaking. "Thank you, again." "I was on my way to town and thought I would stop by to check on you," Grayson said. "I am glad I did." "So am I," Fiona admitted. They stood there for a moment, and then Grayson said, "You look tired, pretty girl. Are you sleeping enough?" There it was again, that easy endearment that made her chest tight. "I sleep fine." "You are working too hard," he observed, taking in the lines of fatigue around her eyes. "Have you eaten today?" "I have been busy." "That is a no, then." Grayson shook his head. "Come on. We are going to town, and I am buying you a meal at the boarding house." "I cannot." "Yes, you can," he said firmly but gently. "You take care of everyone else. Let someone take care of you for a change." The boarding house dining room was simple but clean, and the woman who ran it, Mrs. Henderson, served up plates of beef stew with fresh bread that made Fiona's mouth water. She had not realized how hungry she was until she started eating. "Better?" Grayson asked, watching her with something that looked like satisfaction. "Much," Fiona admitted. "Thank you." "Fiona," he said, leaning forward, "those men today, if they come back or if anyone makes you uncomfortable, you send word to me immediately. Promise me." "I can take care of myself." "I know you can," he interrupted. "But you do not have to, not anymore. That is what I am trying to tell you." She looked at him, really looked at him, seeing the concern and something else in his eyes, something that made her breath catch. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you care?" "Because you are worth caring about," he said simply. "And you are beautiful inside and out, whether you believe it or not." Fiona felt tears prick her eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. "I do not understand you." "What is there to understand? I see a strong, capable, beautiful woman who has been told lies her whole life. I am just telling you the truth." He reached across the table and gently took her hand. "You have the most expressive eyes I have ever seen. Did you know that? They change color in different lights. Sometimes they are gray, sometimes green. Right now they are the color of storm clouds." "Stop," she said, but there was no force behind the word. Why should I stop telling you the truth? Grayson asked. Do you want me to lie instead? Should I tell you that your hair is not the color of honey in sunlight, that your hands are not graceful even when they are rough from work, that your voice does not make me want to hear everything you have to say? Yes, Fiona said desperately, because I do not know what to do with these words. I do not know how to believe them. Grayson's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. Then I will just keep saying them until you do. Over the following months, Grayson became a regular presence in Fiona's life. He would ride down from the mountains every few days, always with some excuse. He needed to pick up supplies. He had extra meat from hunting that he wanted to share. He had heard there might be a storm coming and wanted to make sure her roof was secure. Each time, he would find a moment to tell her something kind about her appearance or her character. Your laugh is like music, pretty girl. The way you bite your lip when you are concentrating is adorable. You are the most beautiful woman in New Mexico. At first, Fiona deflected each compliment, but gradually something began to shift inside her. She started to notice the way Grayson looked at her, the genuine admiration in his eyes. She began to see that he was not mocking her or playing some cruel game. He meant every word. One evening in late autumn, as they sat on her porch watching the sunset, Fiona found herself studying her reflection in the window glass. For the first time, she tried to see what Grayson saw. Her eyes did change color, she realized. Her hair had grown longer and caught the light in interesting ways. Her face had filled out slightly from regular meals, softening the angles she had always thought were too harsh. What are you thinking about? Grayson asked. I am thinking, Fiona said slowly, that maybe you are not entirely wrong. She felt his surprise and turned to find him watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. About what? He asked carefully. About me, she whispered. Maybe I am not as plain as I always believed. The smile that spread across Grayson's face was brighter than the setting sun. Fiona Baker, that is the best thing I have heard in months. It is your fault, she said, and now she was smiling too. You kept saying these things over and over, and somewhere along the way I started to listen. Grayson shifted closer to her, his large frame somehow making her feel protected rather than overwhelmed. I'm going to keep saying them, you know, every single day if I have to. What if I start to believe I am truly beautiful? Fiona asked. What then? Then I will tell you that you are brilliant too, Grayson said, and kind, and brave, and everything else that is true about you. Fiona felt something break open inside her, like a dam giving way after holding back water for too long. All the years of being told she was not enough, that she was lacking, that she was unfortunate, seemed to wash away in the face of Grayson's steady, unwavering regard. Grayson, she said softly, I need to tell you something, anything. I think I am falling in love with you, she confessed, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. I did not mean to. I did not think anyone would ever want me that way. But you make me feel things I have never felt before. You make me feel seen and wanted, and maybe even beautiful. Grayson was very still for a moment, and then he cupped her face in his calloused hands with a tenderness that made her eyes sting with tears. Fiona, I have been in love with you since the first day I saw you in that general store, looking lost and determined all at once. I took one look at you and thought you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Every day since then has only made me more certain. Truly, she whispered. Truly, he confirmed. You are beautiful, Fiona. You are so beautiful it hurts to look at you sometimes. But more than that, you are good. You are real. You are everything I did not know I was looking for. When he kissed her, it was gentle and sure, and Fiona felt like she was finally home. His arms came around her, strong and protective, and she leaned into his embrace, feeling safe and cherished in a way she had never experienced before. "Marry me," Grayson said when they finally pulled apart. "I know it is fast, but I am certain. I want you in my life forever. I want to wake up every morning and tell you how beautiful you are. I want to build a life with you." "I am not easy," Fiona warned, even as joy bubbled up inside her. "I am stubborn and proud, and I do not always know how to accept help." "I know," Grayson said, grinning. "I am counting on it." "So what do you say, pretty girl? Will you marry me?" "Yes," Fiona said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I will marry you." They were wed 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Glenrio. Fiona wore a dress that Mrs. Henderson had helped her sew from fabric Grayson had insisted on buying. It was pale blue, the color of a summer sky, and when Fiona looked at herself in the mirror before the ceremony, she saw something different. She saw a bride. She saw a woman who was loved. She saw someone beautiful. "You ready, pretty lady?" Grayson asked when he came to escort her to the church. He stopped in his tracks when he saw her, his eyes widening. "Fiona, you take my breath away." "You say that every day," she teased, but she was blushing with pleasure. "Because it is true every day," he replied. "But today especially. You are the most beautiful bride I have ever seen." The ceremony was attended by most of the town, and Fiona was surprised by how many people had come to wish them well. She had thought of herself as alone in Glenrio, but as she looked at the gathered faces, she realized she had been building a community without even realizing it. The women whose mending she had done, the families whose washing she had taken in, the shopkeepers and ranchers and townspeople she had interacted with over the months. They had become her neighbors, her friends. After the ceremony, there was a celebration at the boarding house. Mrs. Henderson had organized a feast, and there was music and dancing. Grayson kept Fiona close to his side, his hand never leaving the small of her back, and every time she looked at him, she found him watching her with love and pride. "Happy?" he asked as they swayed to a slow tune. "Happier than I knew was possible," Fiona admitted. "I feel like I am living someone else's life." "This is your life," Grayson said firmly. "Our life, and it is just beginning." They spent their wedding night at Fiona's cabin, which would serve as their home until they could build something larger. Grayson carried her over the threshold despite her protests that she was perfectly capable of walking, and he set her down gently in the main room. "Fiona," he said seriously, "I want you to know that I see you, all of you. Not just the surface, though I meant every word about how beautiful you are. I see your strength and your courage. I see how you have survived things that would have broken other people. I see your kindness and your determination. I love all of it. I love all of you." Fiona reached up to touch his face, feeling the rough stubble of his jaw beneath her fingers. "I spent so many years believing I was not worth loving. Thank you for showing me I was wrong." "You were always worth loving," Grayson said. "Some people were just too blind to see it." That night, Fiona learned what it was to be cherished, to be desired, to be loved completely. Grayson was gentle and patient, his strong hands capable of surprising tenderness. He told her she was beautiful with words and actions, and for the first time in her life, Fiona truly believed it. The next months were the happiest of Fiona's life. She and Grayson fell into an easy rhythm, working together to maintain the cabin and the small farm. Grayson still went into the mountains to hunt and trap, but he never stayed away for more than a few days at a time. He always returned with furs to sell and stories to tell, and he always greeted her with the same words. "Hello, beautiful." Fiona grew stronger and healthier with regular food and the joy that came from being loved. Her face filled out, her skin took on a healthy glow, and her eyes sparkled with happiness. But more than the physical changes, There was a transformation in the way she carried herself. She walked with her head high, confident in her worth as a person and as a woman. One afternoon in spring, as Fiona was working in the expanded vegetable garden, a group of women from town rode up in a wagon. She recognized Mrs. Henderson and several other women she had done work for. "Fiona," Mrs. Henderson called. "We hope you do not mind the intrusion, but we wanted to invite you to join our church ladies group. We meet every Thursday afternoon for quilting and socializing." Fiona was surprised and touched. "I would like that very much. Thank you." "Good," one of the other women said with a warm smile. "We should have extended the invitation sooner. You have become such a valued member of our community." After they left, Fiona stood in her garden, feeling the sun on her face and marveling at how much her life had changed. A year ago, she had been alone, unloved, and convinced of her own inadequacy. Now she had a husband who adored her, a home, friends, and a place in the community. When Grayson returned that evening, she threw herself into his arms, making him laugh with surprise. "What is this for?" he asked, holding her close. "For everything," Fiona said. "For seeing me when I could not see myself. For loving me when I did not know how to be loved. For telling me I was beautiful until I believed it." "It was not hard," Grayson said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You made it easy by being exactly who you are." That summer, Fiona discovered she was with child. She told Grayson one evening as they sat on the porch, her heart racing with nervousness and excitement. "Are you happy?" she asked, searching his face. "Happy," Grayson repeated, and then he let out a whoop of joy that probably carried all the way to town. He picked her up and spun her around, careful despite his enthusiasm. "Happy does not begin to cover it, pretty girl. We are going to have a baby, our baby." "I am scared," Fiona admitted. "What if I am not a good mother? What if—" "Stop," Grayson said gently, setting her down and placing his hands on her shoulders. "You are going to be an amazing mother. You are kind and patient and strong. Our child is lucky to have you." "Our child is lucky to have you too," Fiona said, placing her hand on his cheek. "You are going to be a wonderful father." The pregnancy was not easy. Fiona was sick for the first few months, and as she grew larger, the New Mexico heat made her uncomfortable. But Grayson was there every step of the way, bringing her water, fanning her when she was too hot, holding her when she cried from exhaustion and hormones. "You are so beautiful," he would tell her as her belly swelled. "You are creating life. There is nothing more beautiful than that." In late winter, as snow dusted the New Mexico landscape in a rare cold snap, Fiona went into labor. Mrs. Henderson and the midwife attended her, and Grayson paced outside, too anxious to sit still. The labor was long and difficult, and more than once, Grayson tried to burst into the room, only to be firmly turned away by Mrs. Henderson. Finally, after nearly 20 hours, the cry of a baby filled the cabin. The midwife opened the door, smiling broadly. "You have a son," she announced. "A big, healthy boy, and your wife is tired but well." Grayson rushed inside to find Fiona propped up in bed, exhausted and pale but radiantly happy, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in clean cloth. He approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at his son for the first time. "He is perfect," Grayson breathed, "just like his mother." "I am hardly perfect right now," Fiona said with a tired laugh. "I am a mess." "You are beautiful," Grayson corrected automatically, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "You are always beautiful, but right now you are absolutely glowing." They named the baby George, after Fiona's grandfather, who had been the one person in her childhood to show her kindness. Little George had Grayson's dark hair and Fiona's changing eyes, and from the moment he entered the world, he was loved completely. The first year of George's life was challenging but joyful. Fiona learned how to be a mother with the help of the women in town, who rallied around her with advice and hand-me-down baby clothes. Grayson proved to be a natural father, gentle with his son despite his size and strength. He would hold George in his massive hands, singing off key lullabies that made Fiona laugh and cry at the same time. "Look at what we made," Grayson would say, staring at George with wonder. "He is perfect." "He has your stubbornness," Fiona observed one night when George refused to sleep. "And your beautiful eyes," Grayson countered. Poor boy did not stand a chance of being anything but handsome. As George grew from infant to toddler, Fiona marveled at the life they had built. The cabin had been expanded with Grayson's help and that of some men from town. They now had 2 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, and a parlor for receiving guests. The farm was thriving, producing enough vegetables to feed them and sell at market. Grayson's trapping and hunting brought in steady income, and Fiona still took in some sewing work, though now it was because she enjoyed it rather than out of desperate need. One evening, when George was 2 years old, Fiona stood at the stove making supper while watching her son play with wooden blocks on the floor. Grayson came in from the barn, saw the domestic scene, and stopped in the doorway. "What is wrong?" Fiona asked, noticing his stillness. "Nothing is wrong," Grayson said, his voice thick with emotion. "I am just thinking about how lucky I am. I have the most beautiful wife in the world, a perfect son, a home, everything I never dared to dream about." Fiona left the stove and crossed to him, standing on her toes to kiss him. "I am the lucky one. You changed my entire life, Grayson North. You made me believe I was worthy of love." "You always were," he said, wrapping his arms around her. "I just helped you see it." That night, after George was asleep, they sat on the porch as they had so many times before, watching the stars come out over the New Mexico landscape. "You remember the first time I told you that you were pretty?" Grayson asked. "In the general store," Fiona said immediately. "I thought you were making fun of me." "I know you did, and I understand why. But Fiona, I meant it then, and I mean it now. You are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen, not just on the outside, though you are lovely to look at, but the person you are inside, your heart, your spirit. That is what truly makes you beautiful." "I believe you now," Fiona said softly. "It took time and it took you saying it over and over, but I believe you, and more than that, I believe it about myself. When I look in the mirror now, I see someone worthy, someone loved, someone beautiful." "Good," Grayson said with satisfaction. "That is how it should be." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and then Fiona said, "I have something to tell you." "Oh," Grayson turned to her with interest. "I am with child again," Fiona announced, smiling at the joy that immediately filled his face. "Again?" He pulled her into his arms, laughing. "Fiona, that is wonderful. When?" "Autumn," she said, "around George's birthday." "Our family is growing," Grayson said, pressing his hand to her still flat stomach. "I love you so much, pretty girl. Thank you for giving me this life." "Thank you for giving me mine," Fiona replied. The second pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because Fiona knew what to expect, or perhaps because she was simply happier and more settled. In October, she gave birth to twin daughters, much to everyone's surprise. Grayson nearly fainted when the midwife announced there was a second baby coming, and when it was all over and he held both his daughters, he looked completely overwhelmed. "Two," he kept saying. "We have 2 daughters." "3 children," Fiona said, exhausted but elated. "We have 3 children, Grayson." They named the twins Grace and Gabrielle, and from the moment they arrived, they filled the cabin with noise and life and love. George was fascinated by his baby sisters, wanting to help with everything, and Grayson was completely smitten. The years passed in a blur of activity and joy. George grew into a strong, kind boy who idolized his father and adored his mother. The twins were mischievous and bright, keeping Fiona and Grayson constantly on their toes. The farm expanded, and Grayson's reputation as a guide and hunter grew. They built a larger house, with enough room for their growing family and the occasional guest. Through it all, Grayson never stopped telling Fiona she was beautiful. Every single day, he found a moment to compliment her, to remind her of her worth, to make her feel cherished. And every single day, Fiona believed him a little more. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Grayson took Fiona up into the mountains to the cabin where he had lived before they married. They left the children with Mrs. Henderson, who was like a grandmother to them by now, and spent 3 days alone together. "This is where I used to dream about finding someone," Grayson told her as they stood looking out at the vast landscape. "I never really believed it would happen. I thought I was too rough, too set in my ways. And then I saw you in that general store, and I knew my life was about to change." "I was so lost then," Fiona said, leaning into his side. "I did not know who I was or what I wanted. I just knew I was running from a life that had never felt like mine." "And now?" Grayson asked. "Now I know exactly who I am," Fiona said confidently. "I am a wife, a mother, a member of a community. I am someone who is loved, and yes, I am someone who is beautiful." "You are," Grayson confirmed. "You are so beautiful, Fiona, and I will tell you that every day for the rest of our lives." "I know you will," she said, turning to kiss him. "And I will never stop being grateful for it." They made love in that mountain cabin, taking their time in a way that was rarely possible with 3 young children at home. Afterward, lying in Grayson's arms, Fiona thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the unloved girl in St. Louis to the cherished woman in New Mexico. From someone who could not see her own worth to someone who knew her value deep in her bones. "What are you thinking about?" Grayson asked, running his fingers through her hair. "I am thinking about how you saved me," Fiona said. "No," Grayson corrected gently. "You saved yourself. I just helped you see what was already there." When they returned home, the children rushed to greet them, full of stories about their adventures with Mrs. Henderson. George had lost a tooth, and the twins had learned a new song. The house was messy and loud and full of life, and Fiona loved every chaotic moment of it. That night, after the children were in bed, Fiona and Grayson sat on their porch, watching the stars just as they had done so many times over the years. "I have been thinking," Grayson said. "George is going to need schooling soon, proper schooling. The school in Glenrio is getting a new teacher, but we might want to consider sending him to Santa Fe for a few years when he is older." "That is years away yet," Fiona said. "But yes, we should think about it. I want our children to have opportunities." "They will," Grayson assured her. "We will make sure of it. They are going to grow up knowing they are loved and valued and capable of anything they want to do." "The way I wish I had grown up," Fiona said softly. "Exactly," Grayson confirmed. "No child of ours will ever doubt their worth." As if summoning him with their conversation, they heard small feet padding across the floor, and George appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "I had a bad dream," he said. "Come here, son," Grayson said, and George climbed into his father's lap, still small enough to curl up against Grayson's broad chest. "What did you dream about?" Fiona asked, reaching over to stroke her son's hair. "I dreamed you went away," George mumbled. "Both of you." "We are right here," Fiona assured him. "We are not going anywhere. Promise?" George asked, his eyes already drooping. "Promise," Grayson and Fiona said together. They sat there until George fell asleep, and then Grayson carefully carried him back to bed. When he returned, he pulled Fiona to her feet and into his arms. "I love our life," he said simply. "So do I," Fiona replied. "More than I ever thought possible." The years continued to pass, marked by the usual joys and challenges of family life. George grew tall and strong, taking after his father in build and his mother in coloring. The twins were beautiful and clever, with Grayson's dark hair and Fiona's expressive eyes. There were illnesses and injuries, bad weather and financial worries, but through it all, the foundation of love that Grayson and Fiona had built held strong. When Fiona was 35, she gave birth to their fourth child, another son they named Gabriel. By this time, George was 13 and already helping his father with the hunting and trapping. The twins were 10 and full of energy and opinions. The house was bursting at the seams with life and love. 4 children, Fiona said wonderingly, holding baby Gabriel while watching her older children play in the yard. Sometimes I cannot believe this is my life. Believe it, Grayson said, sitting beside her and wrapping an arm around her shoulders. You deserve every bit of happiness you have. We have, Fiona corrected. We have this happiness together. One afternoon, a stranger rode up to their property. He was well-dressed and rode a fine horse, and he introduced himself as a lawyer from St. Louis. I am looking for Fiona Baker, he said. I was told she might be living in this area. I am Fiona North, Fiona said, her heart beginning to pound. Baker was my maiden name. The lawyer looked relieved. Mrs. North, I am here on behalf of your father's estate. He passed away 6 months ago, and in his will he left you a sum of money and a letter. Fiona was stunned. My father, but he disowned me years ago. Nevertheless, the lawyer said, pulling papers from his bag, he left instructions that this money and letter be delivered to you. After the lawyer left, Fiona sat at the kitchen table, staring at the sealed envelope. Grayson sent the children outside to play and sat beside her. You want me to open it? He offered. No, Fiona said. I need to do this. The letter was brief and written in her father's familiar hand. Fiona, I am writing this as I face my own mortality, and I find I have regrets. Chief among them is how I treated you. Your mother convinced me that you were a disappointment, that you were not worthy of love or investment. I believed her, and in doing so, I failed you as a father. I have heard through distant relations that you have made a life for yourself in New Mexico, that you married and have children. I am glad. I hope you have found the happiness that I denied you. The money I am leaving you is not an apology, because no amount of money could make up for my failures. But perhaps it can make your life easier. I am sorry, Fiona. I was wrong about you. I was wrong about so many things. Fiona read the letter twice, then set it down. She expected to feel anger or vindication, but instead she felt a strange sense of peace. Are you all right? Grayson asked. Yes, Fiona said, and she meant it. He was wrong about me. I know that now, not because he wrote it in a letter, but because you showed me. Every day you showed me my worth until I could see it for myself. What do you want to do with the money? Grayson asked. Fiona thought for a moment. I want to use some of it to improve the school in Glen Rio, and I want to set aside funds for our children's education, and the rest we will save for whatever the future brings. That sounds perfect, Grayson said, pulling her close. You are perfect. Not perfect, Fiona corrected with a smile. But loved, and that is better. As their children grew older, Fiona became more involved in the community. She helped organize charity drives for families in need, worked with the church to improve conditions for widows and orphans, and used her experience to counsel young women who felt lost or undervalued. She never forgot what it was like to believe you were worthless, and she made it her mission to ensure that no one else in Glen Rio felt that way if she could help it. Grayson continued to trap and hunt, but as he got older, he focused more on guiding and less on the physical labor of the wilderness. He became known throughout the territory as an honest, capable man, and his reputation brought steady work and income. But no matter how busy he always made time for his family, and he never forgot to tell Fiona she was beautiful. On their 20th wedding anniversary, the entire town of Glenrio threw them a celebration. It was held in the church hall, and nearly everyone they knew attended. There were speeches and toasts, and people shared stories about how Grayson and Fiona had impacted their lives. "When I first met Fiona," Mrs. Henderson said, standing to address the crowd, "she was a quiet, timid thing who looked like the world had beaten her down. But she had steel underneath, and with the love of a good man, she became one of the strongest women I know." Grayson saw what the rest of us took time to see, that Fiona was beautiful inside and out, and together they have built something remarkable. Later, as they danced together, Fiona rested her head against Grayson's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. 20 years, she murmured. "Can you believe it? Best 20 years of my life," Grayson said, "and there are many more to come." "I love you," Fiona said. "I do not say it enough, but I love you so much. You gave me everything." "You gave me everything," Grayson countered. "You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You are the most beautiful thing that ever happened to me." When Fiona was 48 and Grayson was 52, George announced that he was getting married. His bride was a sweet girl named Hannah from a neighboring ranch, and the wedding was the biggest celebration Glenrio had seen in years. Fiona cried throughout the entire ceremony, remembering her own wedding day and marveling at how different her son's experience was from hers. He was confident and loved, sure of his place in the world. "That is because of you," Grayson whispered as they watched George and Hannah exchange vows. "You broke the cycle. Our children will never doubt their worth because you made sure of it." The twins married within a year of each other, Grace to a teacher from Santa Fe and Gabrielle to a young rancher who worked with George. Gabriel, the youngest, announced his intention to study law and headed off to school in Denver, much to everyone's pride and Fiona's tearful acceptance. Suddenly, the house that had been so full was quiet. It was just Fiona and Grayson again, the way it had been in the beginning. "Well," Grayson said one evening as they sat on the porch, "here we are, back where we started." "Not quite where we started," Fiona said with a smile. "We are older and grayer." "You are still beautiful," Grayson said automatically. "I know," Fiona replied, and the confidence in her voice made Grayson laugh with delight. "Listen to you," he said. "So sure of yourself." "You made me this way," Fiona reminded him. "You told me I was beautiful every day until I had no choice but to believe it." "It was not hard," Grayson said, pulling her close. "It was always true." They filled their newly empty house with grandchildren. George and Hannah had 3 children, Grace had 2, Gabrielle had 4, and even Gabriel eventually married and started a family. The house that had been quiet became loud again on weekends and holidays when the whole family gathered. Fiona loved watching Grayson with the grandchildren. He was patient and kind, telling them stories about the old days and teaching them skills he had learned in the mountains. He was getting older, his hair now more silver than brown, his movements a bit slower, but he was still strong and capable. "Grandpa," one of the grandchildren asked one day, "how did you and Grandma fall in love?" Grayson looked at Fiona, his eyes twinkling. "Well, I saw her in the general store, and I thought she was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. But Grandma always says she was not pretty when she was young," the child said, confused. "Your grandma was wrong," Grayson said firmly. "She was always beautiful. She just did not know it yet. So I told her every day until she believed me." "Every single day?" the child asked, eyes wide. "Every single day," Grayson confirmed. "And I still do." Fiona smiled, her eyes misty. Even after all these years, Grayson's words could still move her to tears. When Fiona was 61, She fell ill with pneumonia during a harsh winter. For days, she burned with fever while Grayson barely left her side. The children came, fear in their eyes, but Grayson refused to let them despair. "She is going to be fine," he insisted. "She is the strongest person I know." And he was right. Slowly, painfully, Fiona recovered. When she was finally well enough to sit up and take notice of her surroundings, she saw Grayson asleep in the chair beside the bed, his hand still holding hers. He looked exhausted, older than she had ever seen him, and her heart ached with love for this man who had devoted his life to her. "Grayson," she whispered, squeezing his hand. He woke instantly, his eyes flying to her face. "Fiona, how do you feel?" "Better," she said. "But I think you need to rest." "I am fine," Grayson said, but Fiona could see the lie in the circles under his eyes. "Lie down with me," she said, shifting to make room in the bed. Grayson climbed in carefully, wrapping his arms around her as if she were made of glass. "I was so scared," he admitted. "I could not lose you, not now, not ever." "You are not going to lose me," Fiona promised. "I am not done living yet. We have grandchildren to spoil and anniversaries to celebrate." "You are so beautiful," Grayson said, looking at her with the same love and wonder he had shown her for over 30 years. "Even sick, even with your hair a mess, you are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." "I believe you," Fiona said, and she did. They recovered together, spending their days slowly rebuilding their strength. The children visited often, bringing food and company, and gradually the house returned to normal. When Fiona was 65 and Grayson was 69, they celebrated their 42nd wedding anniversary. The whole family gathered for a massive party that seemed to include half the town. There were grandchildren and great-grandchildren now, running around the property that Fiona and Grayson had built together. "Look at all this," Fiona said to Grayson as they watched the chaos. "Look at what we created." "You created it," Grayson said. "You took the love I gave you and multiplied it 1,000 times over. Every single person here exists because you believed you were worthy of love." "We created it," Fiona corrected. "Together, the way we have done everything." As the sun set over their property, painting the New Mexico sky in shades of gold and pink, Fiona stood on the porch with Grayson's arms around her, surrounded by the sound of their family's laughter. 42 years, Grayson murmured, "and you are still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen." "Every day," Fiona said, turning in his arms to face him. "You have told me that every single day for over 40 years. And I will keep telling you for as long as I have breath," Grayson promised. "I know," Fiona said, reaching up to cup his weathered face. "And I will keep believing you. Because of you, I learned to see myself the way you see me. Because of you, I learned that I was always worthy of love. You changed my life, Grayson North. You made me believe I was beautiful, and in doing so, you made me beautiful." "You were always beautiful," Grayson insisted. "I just helped you see it." They kissed as the sun set, surrounded by their family, in the life they had built together from nothing but love and determination, and daily affirmations of worth. Fiona had never been called pretty before Grayson North walked into her life, but he had told her daily until she started to believe. And in believing, she had become the woman she was always meant to be. The years that followed were quieter but no less full of love. Grayson's health began to fail as he entered his 70s, but he remained sharp and loving until the end. On a cool autumn morning when he was 76 and Fiona was 72, he woke early and watched her sleep, memorizing the lines of her face in the dawn light. When she stirred, his face broke into a smile. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, as he had said every morning for nearly 50 years. "Good morning," Fiona replied, reaching for his hand. "I love you," Grayson said. "You are the most beautiful woman in the world, Fiona North." You always have been, and you always will be. I love you too, Fiona said. Thank you for showing me my worth. Thank you for everything. Grayson passed peacefully in his sleep a week later, with Fiona holding his hand and their children surrounding them. The entire town mourned the loss of a good man, but no one grieved as deeply as Fiona, who had lost her greatest love and most steadfast champion. But even in her grief, Fiona remained strong. She had learned well the lessons Grayson had taught her about her own worth and resilience. She continued to be active in the community, to dote on her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, to live fully even without him by her side. When people offered their condolences, Fiona would smile through her tears and say, "I had 50 years with the best man who ever lived. He told me I was beautiful every single day, and he made me believe it. Not everyone gets that kind of love in a lifetime. I am grateful for every moment we had." Fiona lived to be 87 years old, surrounded by a family that loved her and a community that respected her. She passed away quietly one spring morning, and her children found her with a smile on her face and Grayson's wedding letter clutched in her hand, the one he had given her on their wedding day that she had kept all these years. At her funeral, George stood to speak, his voice thick with emotion. "My mother was the strongest woman I ever knew. She overcame a childhood that would have broken most people, and she built a life full of love and purpose. She did that because my father saw her worth when no one else did, and he told her every day until she believed it. Together, they showed all of us what real love looks like. Not perfect, but steadfast. Not easy, but worth it. They showed us that words have power, that love can heal, and that it is never too late to become who you were meant to be." The whole town of Glenrio turned out for the funeral, and Fiona was laid to rest beside Grayson, just as she had requested. Her tombstone bore a simple inscription that the children had agreed upon. "Beloved wife, mother, and friend, she was beautiful, and she was. Not because of the arrangement of her features or the color of her hair, but because she had learned to see herself through the eyes of someone who loved her completely. Because Grayson North had told her she was beautiful every day until she believed it, and in that belief, she had become the most beautiful version of herself. Their love story became legend in Glenrio, passed down through generations as an example of what love should be. Patient, constant, affirming, and true. The house they built still stood, home now to one of their great-grandchildren, and the porch where they had spent so many evenings still welcomed family gatherings and quiet moments of reflection. The wildness of the West had been tamed by the time Fiona died, but the love story of Grayson and Fiona North remained as untamed and powerful as the landscape that had brought them together. It was a testament to the power of seeing worth in others, of speaking truth even when it is not believed, and of the transformative nature of real, steadfast love. She had never been called pretty before. But one mountain man had told her daily until she started to believe, and in that believing, she had discovered a beauty that went far beyond the surface. She had discovered the beauty of being truly loved, truly seen, and truly valued, and that beauty had lasted a lifetime.